23 seconds. All right. Here we go. We're hot.
From the broken down, low rent, sleazy, double greasy Pirate Radio Nut Hut Studios, it's time for the very first ever Southern
CPR Street Gang, this is all fighting. Standing by, over. CPR Street Gang, this is all fighting. Standing by, over.
Right now, it's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines,
clocks run out, time's up.
Wind is blowing cold and dark. On the road and no way out. Broken hearts, a smoking gun. On the run. On the run.
Little bit is fine. Take my hands outside. Got into a fist. Who claims it? The man they want to be.
It's Tuesday night, it's Aftermath FM. Late night. So glad you stuck around. We got a big show planned for you tonight. The outlaw, Dr. Kevin McCarran's here. He brought along a partner, a friend. We're going to get into some cogent information and some lively discussion. So, Into the Microcosm is on the air. Stick around. Our friend Dr. Fauci has a long history. I'm gonna revive the memory hole tonight a little bit. Maybe bring up some other friends of his family.
Then it's light outside. Don't disturb the
So there's been some severe and intense weather on the islands, and Epic Journeyman is been working. Literally, I think he worked 48 hours straight with 4-hour naps here and there, a 4-hour nap. So he's not going to be with us tonight. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go straight for the jugular vein, and I'm going to bring Dr. Kevin McCarran in right away. Doc McCarran, are you there?
I am indeed.
Excellent.
Coming through, okay.
Yeah, man. Hey, you are. And, you're coming off a real hot adventure over into Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. How was your stint on the big show over there?
Well, it went very quickly,
Yeah.
and to my surprise, there wasn't time to think much about the scope of it. But afterwards, a dear friend of mine who lives in the United States sent me an email. He goes, I was listening to the radio, and imagine my surprise as he heard me come on, and so yes,
Yeah.
well, at least I know it went out that far. So bravo to Clyde Lewis. Thank you to Clyde Lewis, I should say.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it sounded like you guys had a good time. Clyde he felt, I know I was listening to the after show, and he was just saying, he was just raving about the show in general, and thought that was really a great show. So, man, I'm stoked, and I'm glad that you're here tonight. And so now you brought with you a buddy or a friend or I guess maybe a researcher that you've come in contact with and maybe made friends with over a period of time. And so we wanted to bring him into the conversation tonight because I think he's got a lot of really great and pertinent information to bring to the table. So, Nick, you want to come on in and join us, brother? And tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your experience, and maybe how you guys hooked up with Dr. McCarran.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, no
and
problem.
How's the audio?
Fantastic, man. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, I'm an independent researcher. I have some experience with some major universities in years gone by. And worked at one of the major universities on the West Coast of the United States that had a virology research clinic. And that's where I really kind of cut my teeth on, hard science in the life sciences. It wasn't part of my background, and I learned a whole lot. And then I came into contact with some of the material that we're going to be talking about tonight. And at first blush, I really was very skeptical. The premise is kind of outrageous if you don't have any kind of research background in learning about what happens behind closed doors and what some people in white coats will get up to in their laboratories. And so I spent some years very carefully working through the bibliographies and the referenced materials of several of the early whistleblowers about this topic. And many of them are gone now. There are still a couple of the prominent authors are still with us. So we can mention their work, and there are probably books that folks are, somewhat familiar with if they've read about, or learned about this topic. And then how I came into contact with Kevin was a reference from a fellow researcher who was really looking at the coronavirus issue and just said, hey, we should probably get together and compare notes. So Dr. McCarran and I have had some conversations, and Thursday night, last night, went on the stream, and we looked at a pretty big data set and brought in a whole lot of different topics as we talked back and forth through the timeline. So that's kind of a background.
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited to have you here because I think there's going to be some important revelations here as we move on through the night. So, Doc McCarran, why don't you get the ball rolling a little bit on the conversation here? And I'm standing by with a lot of information about some of these current players and their families and some of their histories. I even dug up an old Dr. Stan Monteith. He's dead now, but he was a broadcaster for many years, one of the old school broadcasters. and he put together a piece back in the day about Margaret Sanger, which is still around, and I was able to dig that up. So I'm gonna have them bring some of that to the table. But why don't you get the conversation started, Doc, and I will get here to my files.
Sure. Well, I hope everyone's prepared because there's a very, very dark aspect to what we're going to be looking at. Nick alluded to it a little bit about how scientists, not just scientists, institutions, government organizations, what we would call in the modern day deep state, have a very, very checkered past, and there's a direct line, a thread from these programs which were started often around or after the Second World War. Project Paperclip wasn't really rocket scientists, but there were more doctors and biologists brought over to the United States. They took very prominent positions and have, this is my understanding, helped shape the direction of the research, the movement of money, the elevation of some individuals over others, and
Right.
with an overarching theme of leading towards, you bring up Margaret Sanger, it's not eugenics, but the prospect of euphenics, and they've.
Now,
Well, I
can you just,
want Nick to explain the details, but there's a confluence of programs coming together where diseases that have become known to us potentially have their roots, direct roots from these programs, and it's not just one virus; it's a number, but a number of quite famous or well-known ones, not famous. So I don't want to use Nick's airtime, and I think it's precious airtime. So Nick, if you
come on in, Nick,
want to pick a place to go, and then we can. I'll jump in if I feel I can add something. And
absolutely. Well, let's dig in right there. Let's kind of go from the past forward. So where we're at in the timeline is perfect. It's the 1950s. Some listeners may have, a degree or a great amount of insight on the workings of Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip, and the scope of it really encompassed a whole lot of scientists that were spread out across both the material and propulsion sciences, and definitely a whole lot of them came over in the biosciences. And when we think about Paperclip, some people think of a single sort of lift and shift of people that were in rooms, in their cells, waiting at Nuremberg, and they got interviewed by a certain Colonel Corso. Corso was involved in managing foreign technology. That was part of his scope. And really, Paperclip was very, very large, and it came in from multiple directions. Paperclips joined the programs over time from South America. Some of them sort of came out of the woods. And what I really don't have much data on, but I'm fascinated to learn more about, are Japanese Paperclips, because therein were the real bioscientists on diseases, on zoonotic transfer, and some of the capabilities that moved into these U.S. programs over time. But that sort of sets the table, that there's an influence there in our academia, in our private pharmacology, and as we see in the records, also in intelligence and defense. And that factors in based on sort of who was managing the programs we're going to be talking about. So we're moving forward a little bit on the timeline to the late 50s. And at this point in time, a couple of important sort of tracks, swim lanes, are in motion. One of them is the war the race, the purse fight to find a new polio vaccine. And this is as the result of several deaths and a number of injuries and paralyses that were caused by a bad batch of polio vaccine in the mid 50s. And it kicked off a race between the big players in virology and vaccinology to try and find a safe and stable replacement for the product. And there's
Nick,
a whole.
Sorry, just let the people know why there was a problem with those first generation of vaccines. This is important information that needs to be established.
And isn't this
as a foundation?
Is this the vaccine that it was said to have had the cancer virus in it? A cancer virus that had been subsequently admitted to by Bayer?
Let's just open that book and lay it on the table. There's a whole lot. We could have a whole show on this era, on just the 5 years of, say, 55 to 60. But yes, there were. The issue was the use of primates in the preparation of human vaccine products. So I'm talking about a variety of different techniques. Sometimes this process would occur in a live animal. Sometimes what they would call a fractional material, so blood and quite commonly the kidney tissue would be used as, think of soil that you grow a flower in, right? You have to have soil, and the soil is this substrate, this base material. So they did what's called viral amplification, or increasing the titer of different germs inside living animals, and then culling the animals and filtering their blood to try and isolate and concentrate the target germ that they were making a vaccine for. And in this case, we're talking about polio. But there were there were a variety of techniques that were employed. Real loose, we'll say, safety and precaution, as well as diagnostic capabilities. They at this point weren't able to run a PCR or use a super high power tunneling electron microscope. They really would begin to see, in many cases, the evidence of a mistake in the laboratory as it manifested as a disease or a condition in a patient.
And so some people don't realize this, but between the period that Nick is describing, it was only 20 years that they'd really started to get their teeth into what virology was with respect to isolation. So from the 1930s, the 1950s, in the 1930s, that through the use of the first electron microscopes and special ceramic filters, they were able to identify the tobacco mosaic virus. And plant material is way more simpler to manipulate and experiment with than the very complex fluids that come from especially primates and humans. So think about that just in terms of the time from 1930s, first ever pictures of a virus, to 1950s, and where we are now 60, 70 years later. People need to get these time frames into their minds, just to you need to paint around the edges to give yourself a boundary.
Well,
but also
let me ask you this:
how little
are we at
they
a
were
moment,
starting with.
Are we at a moment right now in 2021, just like they were back then, at the beginnings of the understanding of viruses? We're at the beginnings of the understanding of the DNA systems in the human being. And we're sort of at the same sort of experimental phase like we were in then. I mean, were they not experimenting basically on humans back then by taking some of the things that they learned and then trying to, propagate a cure for some of these big named diseases across the world? I mean, we found a cure for polio. We found a cure for this. We went to the moon. This kind of thing. Are we in the same moment in time? Just barely learning about DNA with the virus that we have now, and and the injectable that they have to go along with it? Are we kind of in the same kind of learning
Well, it
phase?
depends how cynical you want to be, but I'll let Nick give his impression.
You figured I had plenty of that. I think it's fair to say there's a similar event happening, and that's barging forward with really a resistance to safety and testing.
Right.
That's the underlying theme. Those are the themes that tie these two time periods together. There's fantastic capabilities that we have now to be precautionary, to be preemptive. So it makes it even a little more bittersweet that it's not happening. That instead we're trying to barge through with emergency use authorizations to push candidate biologicals through the gate and just skirt around what would be an expensive and time-consuming and potentially disastrous result, for a study to find out if a product is safe. Instead, we're using the world as that petri dish.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's countless examples of things that have been released to the public with way less negative results, and things have been halted. But for some reason, it doesn't matter what things come out, what people are saying, how many. I think I saw a thing where 90 laboratories and universities all tried to isolate the current virus and could not. So I mean, I'm just a guy sitting here thinking to myself, well, let me see, if you can't isolate it, then how'd you test for it? And since you can't isolate it, how do you know it's a derivative of it, since you don't even know what it was to begin with? It's kind of confusing, and average people really don't have time to sit around. All they do is they can sit there and listen to their experts on TV, scare them to death into doing something they may or may not want to do. And like we've said all along, it's up to you. We're into the freedom of America. If you want to partake in the experiment, that's up to you, and more power to you. But everybody should have the ability to make their own decisions about this. And I think Nick and the doc are pointing to some pretty substantial research that says that this rush to the marketplace has been going on for a long time. Seems like the human form here in America is nothing more than a bunch of guinea pigs for whoever decides they want to run a program out on us. With that, you guys want to jump back? We're coming up on a break in about 5 minutes
Sure.
here. Yeah.
Sure thing. Well, yeah, let's try and bring it into a place where we can put in a bookmark for the break. So another aspect of that period of time, aside from the use of the animals, is the emerging understanding of a number of new pathogens that, as a result of using primates in preparation for human medicine, have crossed over and are beginning to present in larger and larger numbers of the general population. So let's pick one of them that is, interestingly enough, it was an issue then. You'll find out where it came from, and you can now look today at what they're trying to do to pretend that it's a problem they're going to fix, and that's RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and it was originally called CCA, chimpanzee coryza agent, and the reason it was called CCA is because it infected recipients of vaccine products because they were produced using chimpanzees to make it. And they found a similar pathogen in the chimpanzee, and they, did what they could as far as a comparison at that point in time, and confirmed that indeed this is the same pathogen. And they quickly renamed it to RSV. And that's an important aspect in, we'll say, medical taxonomy, is when something is inappropriate or you want to move away from it, there are different ways to do that. And anything that had an animal, any germ that has an animal name in it that's then begins to infect people, you certainly want to rename that. You wouldn't want to be pointing anyone's attention to the fact that it's a dog virus or a primate virus or a fish virus, because how in the world is that getting into people? And if one of those channels has to do through the laboratory, or as they say in the field, it was an iatrogenic injury or infection caused by man, then, that's why you want to change those names around. And that's a pretty straightforward, it's sort of a universal concept of cover up. So that's today you'll see there's development and there's talk about RSV and creating a vaccine to protect against RSV, which is kind of the snake eating its own tail, because it came from using chimpanzees to create vaccine products, and now it's endemic in the population, and it affected a number of cell lines and products over the years. It didn't just go away in the 50s. It was studied, it's been studied consistently since it emerged in mankind. And now they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to have a new vaccine to get rid of the one that we gave you with the vaccine. So that's kind of an interesting loop.
It is.
And that changing of definitions has now been extended to well-known techniques like vaccination.
Right.
So I heard the word of the year for 2021 is vaccine from Merriam-Webster. Well, that's because they've gone and changed it a couple of times over the last year to have it concord with what's happening with the these gene transfection techniques that have been rolling out. And you shouldn't be allowed to do this. It's a shocking state of affairs, this changing of definitions and how they're able to get away with it. Particularly when it's your health at risk here and the health of your loved ones. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, our idea of what's going on here. I'm sorry, I'm having some problems with my headphones. Hang on a second. So ultimately, one of the problems is that we all want to heal. We all want to get better. And for some reason, we've been trained to trust these representatives and these people in white coats that come out and tell us this stuff. And, I mean, my parents obviously lined me up and sent me down to get my polio vaccine, and when I was in my 40s, I got cancer, and a bunch of other people in my same, age bracket who also got that same polio vaccine. For some reason, a lot of us ended up getting cancer, so the thing is, the good old immune system doesn't seem to be good in this new modern world, because it seems to me that most of these deadly things that keep popping up are ones that are made in a laboratory. It's not they're not developing out in the wild out here. Seems like there's more deadly viruses developing in the world in laboratories than there is in the actual world. Because, I mean, if it was developed in the actual world, then wouldn't it common sense dictate that our immune systems at some point would then be able to eradicate that from, obviously people would die, but eventually wouldn't we come to terms with that? I mean, it's not going to kill everybody. Someone's going to live, and then from that, other people will live from that, right? Doc?
Well, the things that are very virulent and very dangerous, and I would say in the last 25 years that we keep seeing these chapters, they really feel like product releases, like software, 2.0, 3.0.
Yeah.
And then you go and you examine the scientific literature and indeed find abundant parallels between the problems that are suddenly occurring in this outbreak and the kind of funds and projects and specific objectives that have been pursued in the lab in the years just preceding. So that's an important aspect for people that have the chops for this, that are going to look up things in the peer review literature and look at the history. You can pick anything. You can pick MERS, the original SARS, Ebola, Marburg disease. You can find a whole litany of different, what I think of as releases, and then find corresponding evidence. And I'm not talking about a meme, or an anecdote. I'm talking about a copious amount of scientific and policy and financial material that says, okay, this was an objective, and this is when they reached this point, and this is when they reached this point. So I agree. It underscores a couple of important things. I think we're probably getting close to the break here, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
We do need science, and it provides a lot of good in our lives. And there's all kinds of science. And in the biological sciences, there are so many people that have, none of these dubious objectives or access. So it's not a war on the white coats. It's not a new kind of us and them.
No.
People as patients certainly can grow and learn and become more integrated and engaged with their practitioners and their care providers. But on the awareness, and as a society, we don't normally sit around and look up this kind of material on a Friday night. It just doesn't occur to us.
And
it's not on the radar.
And the thing is that's what we are. We put our faith into these representatives to be up there taking care of that for us, so we can all go to work every day and pursue our happiness and live free. But it turns out that in a system where listen, there isn't. Hold on a second. I'm having problems with these headphones. Hang on a second. There isn't a more. This system feeds on itself because, listen, the pharmaceutical companies, they're the ones making the money later. And then every time you get a problem, you got to go into the hospital. And every time you go in the hospital, the amount of money that it costs for you to be in that hospital is a lot of money. So you think about the exponential profits in a healthcare for-profit system where you get experimented on by pharmaceutical companies and end up in the same exact system, paying into that system. It's a never-ending cycle of money. And really, at this point, the pharmaceutical company known as Pfizer is making $1,000 a second. They just reported a $2.3 billion profit in, I think it was yesterday. So
for the quarter or for the year?
For the quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, let me just point out a really basic thing. Look at a place where there is something akin to socialized medicine. Those countries don't allow genetically modified organisms in their food. You know why? Because they're the ones paying for your health care. And they don't want to pay for a bunch of sick people going to the doctors all the time. But in America, man, you can put whatever you want in our food, and you can do whatever you want and experiment on us. And don't worry about it, because we'll end up in the hospital where we got to pay big money, and everybody will get rich. Because that's what it's all about in America, isn't it? It's a capital.
Well, you were describing the Pfizer-Monsanto relationship when you talked about that loop.
Right.
Pfizer was the major owner of Monsanto all during the rise of glyphosate getting into being sprayed on everything. And now, boy, they're raking in, the bucks for all of the gastrointestinal and endocrine disruption and all sorts of disorders. And obviously, it's oncogenic. It's been shown, to cause single and double strand breaks in vitro. And these huge judgments in California were not a fluke.
No.
They were billion-dollar judgments, and they did not get thrown out. So, that's what was happening.
Yeah, it's literally. Go ahead, Doc. I hear you in there.
I just wanted to say, it's staggering, this very perverse relationship that exists now. These corporations fold into each other. There's a shields put into place with respect to who is culpable, and it's a very perverse industry or set of industries that's working with government collusion. And in the face of it, it can seem almost overwhelming to have to navigate this landscape, but it is possible. Find the right people, and there you can, and then work steadily forward, and even because I see people that are panicking about should they or shouldn't they take the vaccine, etc. These are all personal choices that you have to find your way. That is working big boy. Wait.
Yeah.
That you have to find your the place for your family, yourself, and there is the information out there. You've just got to be be patient and share this with other people so that they know that these, well, especially in the United States, but it's going globally, have been doing this for a very long time, and they don't care. At the end of the day, they can wash their hands. The cost of doing business with respect to the claims in court, that's factored in.
They don't care because there's more customers where you came from. If you die, there's a bunch of other people standing right behind you that need help. And you know what really bothers me? Number one is, Bill Gates. He stole Windows software. He can't even make my operating system work right, and now he's involved with some new software injection that I'm getting. And then I'm going to have to keep getting these upgrades just like I do on my Windows, Windows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you just going to have to keep going. And so I know for a fact that they were, before all this happened, 5-7 years ago, they've been trying to figure out a way to get people to step up and get the flu vaccine every year. And even to the point where they were giving it away and no one would come down and get it. And, and now, so because one of the things that, these pharmaceutical companies wanted was some guarantee that people were going to step up every year for a certain amount of money. So, hey, man, it's called, let's project how much money we're going to make this year. How many people we got? Oh, 300 million? Okay, yeah, 300 million times $350. That's how it works. So, but they could never get people to do it. And now it seems to me, just like they changed the name on the definition of what an injection is, maybe they're just changing the name of what it is they want you to get injected for. Instead of it being the flu, it's some other thing. And it's just not, now it's that thing, but, a couple weeks from now, it'll be another thing. And a thing, and a thing, and a thing, and we'll just keep going.
We're at this point. That this is what people have to understand, and it's moved very rapidly. We've gone from arguing about the provenance of where SARS-CoV-2 came from with respect to its lab origins to a few months later, after they've rolled out these experimental concoctions, to coming for children. And hopefully Nick's going to expand on this, but we know that they don't have qualms about experimenting on human beings to the point where they will line children up as well. And it's at this point that we have to start saying stop, enough. We want to see what it is that you're doing and hold people accountable.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it shouldn't get to a point where we're putting those children up there, especially when there's nothing the matter with them. That's the thing. Is, look,
where's the social contract that said, or where has it ever been that we would use the children to protect the adults? Children right now are doing relatively well with SARS-CoV-2. I'm not saying there's no problems, but there's certainly no grounds for the interventions that they're making, especially with what appears to be the emerging risks. And if this is the world that we're stepping into, that we literally line the kids up, because we got to think about, people who haven't looked after their health, people who've, at the end of their lives anyway. This is an absurd arrangement. And what, we're going to do it to everyone in the world?
No, we're not going to. And it looks like, I mean, maybe things are turning around. I mean, maybe they're not. I'm not real sure. I do know this. I'm running a bit late, but on the break. But before I go to that break, IBM, they were barcoding humans. That's basically what they were doing, right? They were numbering humans. The first computer system was there specifically to number people. And, this has been going on for a long time. And so now we're at this moment where now we're also going to get numbered just because, whether it's the day that we went and got our last booster shot. I mean, are you coming up green, yellow, or red when you show up at the restaurant? No, that's probably going to be the big question coming into the new year. All right, we'll be right back. It's in the microcosm. We're here with Nick and Doc McCarran. We'll be right back. It's Aftermath FM. We'll be right back.
Tis the season, and to celebrate, in the month of December, Ground Zero and Aftermath.fm are offering magnificent deals for listeners. Check it out. For the entire month of December, fans of Ground Zero can get an exclusive membership for only $49 for the year. And that's not all. Premium memberships are only $79 for the year. Need some stocking stuffers? Well, we have something for that too. A premium friends and family plan is just $129 for the year. All memberships include access to all of Ground Zero's archived shows. That's thousands of hours of Ground Zero on demand. You'll have complete access to the document libraries and research groups, and you'll have full participation in a monthly Zoom chat with the man himself, Clyde Lewis. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and take advantage of these great Christmas deals right now. For more information, head on over to aftermath.media right now. Again, that's aftermath.media.
How healthy are your arteries? Deteriorating circulation has a number of early warning signs. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, fingers and or toes often go cold, arms and or legs often go to sleep, sharp diagonal crease in the earlobe, short walks cause cramping or pains in legs. Memory is not as good as it used to be. Ankles swell late in the day. Chest pain after physical exercise or emotional stress. If you experience even one of these symptoms, your circulatory system is crying out for attention. Extendivite is a natural solution to help improve your overall health. Extendivite is not your average heart tonic. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or find us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
On June 1st, 1996, John and Joyce Edmonds purchased a ranch in Rainbow Valley, Arizona. What has ensued for the past 2+ decades beguiles all concepts of our reality. After 23 years, John has finally told his whole story. The story of Stardust Ranch transcends its geography and John and Joyce Edmonds themselves. It becomes a story for the human race at a very important time in our journey as people on this planet. Get your copy of Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, available exclusively on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle.
Monday through Friday, 10:30 Pacific, immediately following Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero. It's the after party, the underground. That's Dave Meniketti from On the Blue Side. Bad Feeling. It's Aftermath of them, and I'm here with Dr. Kevin McCarran and researcher Nick. What's your last name? Is there a place where people can find your work also, just to let people know? If there is, why don't you shout it out real quick?
There's good reasons for me to maintain my anonymity.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
I'm
no worries.
kind of like a Cheshire cat.
I got you.
I pop up on Twitter, and I'm connected with a lot of the researchers on there. If people are on Twitter looking at contemporary science, discussions about the corona, not just obviously promoters of products and protocol, but the dissenters. If they're looking at those voices, then they'll see me around.
Okay.
And I'm Nick on Twitter. And I can chat over the my Twitter handle. That's just fine.
No worries. All right. So why don't you get the ball rolling, Doc, and get us going in a direction here where you want to get into? Because I know there's some good correlations between what went on in the past and what's going on today. And so why don't you get us going?
Well, I'm just going to hand straight over to Nick, because we were getting to the point where these primate programs had been instantiated and the techniques just were not as sophisticated 60, 70 years ago. So please, Nick, if you could try to bring us up to date.
Okay, Back to the Future. It's 1959. We're in the African Congo. And we're in the middle, about a year and a half into an oral polio field trial. So this is back in the polio race, looking for that next product that's gonna be the new coronavirus vaccine, right? And Dr. Hilary Kaprowski is using chimpanzees in a camp. And he'd hired the local pygmy tribes who were the best at this process, and they would collect the animals unharmed. And there were at the end of the program a catalog of over 600 animals that were housed at Lindy Camp across the river from Stanleyville Laboratories, and they were producing field vats of the polio campaign material, the OPV. And that oral polio vaccine was being inoculated in everybody. Think about basic compulsory vaccination, but it wasn't a jab in the arm. It was squirted into the mouth. And in this population, following the vaccine campaign, which they reported in the literature as being very successful and achieving high and effective rates of protection against polio and achieving their aims, there followed the beginnings of a cancer epidemic. and a variety of different pathogens obviously had made it right from the chimpanzee material into the people. Now, I think that this was, as I want to stop here and defer to an author. I said there's a couple of survivors. One of them is Ed Hooper. And he's a researcher, a journalist, I'd say an amazing citizen scientist in the UK. And he wrote The River. And if someone wants to get it, he just published for free a reunion edition. So if you go and find Ed Hooper, The River, you should be able to find the PDF for download for free. And it's over 1,000 pages, but he does the best job as I'll say a medical anthropologist and a historian in examining correlations of where this polio vaccine was administered and the first footprints of what they believed was HIV, and I think was probably a rough transfer of SIV. And the reason I say that is because it hadn't gone into the lab yet. When they were doing this campaign, it was really about culling the monkeys and taking their kidneys and pureeing them down to a substrate, using their blood, also called sera, in a number of different reductions and filtrations to feed this mix. And there's a formula for keeping these batches alive and healthy. But the problem was the base material that they were using was full of primate vaccines that had not been cataloged or identified. Only a handful really were on the books. And in the middle of this, there was a growing furor about SV40. And it was getting more and more attention in scientific circles. More labs and more locations, geographies around the world were conducting their own confirmatory investigations in animals and finding that indeed stock product of the current polio vaccine that was on the shelf was able to produce tumors, very aggressive tumors in a high percentage of the test animals. So that was moving up in priority and in risk as a profile, as a risk issue for U.S. health authorities and the pharma partners involved in producing the products.
Well, so let me ask you this.
And it came to a.
Let me ask you this now: is the production of these tumors, is that a big flag that goes up that says that this is causing cancer or this has the potential to cause cancer? I mean, is that
It's precisely what it is.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Go ahead.
So this is I think really going to be, since we're in a radio format and we're not sharing slides and data sets and things like that, this is going to be more of sort of the college lecture kind of approach. There's a word for that, and it's oncogenic. And many people, anybody that's dealt with had a personal encounter either in their body or in a loved one. They know who an oncologist is. They know what oncology is, the science, contemporary science of, allopathic approach to cancer. But what most people don't understand is what's back there in those books behind the white coat, and what they did or didn't pay attention to in school about where this stuff comes from. And in many cases, I really can't, I'm not going to argue that most cancer can be cured. I don't have a book to sell you or a product or anything like that. Right. But I will say that it is worthwhile for people to learn about the potential viral associations of something that they may have picked up from an animal or another person in the course of their lifetime, that if they went after that, they might make a real change or improvement in their possible outcomes in dealing with cancer.
Well put. Go ahead, Doc. I heard you there. Hey, so let's just so you know, we got some listeners in Russia right now, and Finland, some people in the UK, France, Turkey. Let me see here. We got Australia, of course, Canada, and the United States. So, hey, man, we're worldwide tonight, guys. So it's a great conversation. Now, go ahead, Doc.
Well, there's how should we say, so people maybe are familiar with a individual called Kary Mullis, who's famed for the discovery of PCR. And he sort of reached notoriety as he began to write papers as they were looking to identify HIV in the laboratory, and as he was doing this work and writing these papers, he wanted to cite a source as to where HIV could have come from. And I'm not going to say no one really knew, but there was always obfuscation around this point. And as Nick said just a few minutes ago, it's high probability that it emerged out of these experiments they were doing, where they were taking churned up monkey tissue, sticking it through various filters, and jabbing it into test animals, and I'm afraid test humans, as they were trying to develop these new vaccines. And no, very few people are even cognizant of the fact that something like HIV could have come out of a program like this. And even more disturbing is the direction that this research takes, which is, you can take a virus like simian immunodeficiency virus or HIV, and it's a retrovirus, which means that it's able to translocate its genome into the host in order to continually express proteins. This, if you could get that property without the syndromes associated around it, it actually becomes a very, very, or theoretically, is a powerful tool for genetic manipulation. And I wouldn't put it past these people back in the 60s and 70s, as these phenomena were being recorded and recognized, of knowing and understanding this. When you look at the bigger picture around what these programs were geared towards, euphenics, not eugenics. Okay?
Well, distinguish the difference between eugenics and euphenics. What is the difference?
In a nutshell, eugenics would be the control and directing of population through coarse measures of deciding who can and can't breed, and things like forced sterilization. Whereas think of euphenics as modifying the person once they're born to give them advantageous traits. So if you could develop a system where you could make your soldiers 10-20% stronger and a 10% increase in their IQ, well, as a military, you're going to do that and hang the consequences if you don't see anything during the time of their service. And if something pops out 20 years later, nothing to do with us, Governor.
Well, I mean, at the point
we tested them, they were safe.
Well, let me ask you this thing: as the point that you've been, let's just say, you've been bred or genetically modified from birth for a specific job, like say you're bred specifically to see in the dark and you're 3 feet tall so you can work in a mine. But at the point that you're genetically modified, do you have a soul? And do you have rights? Is it okay if you just do those people get to be treated the same later on? I mean, I'm sure that's a question for the future. But
I mean, straight away, that if they're humans, yes, those rights do apply, and we should enforce them ever more strongly under these conditions or under such circumstances. The fact that we're in a discussion right now where literally the Germans and Austrians want to suspend the Hague Convention in Europe. That's a discussion that's popped up in the last couple of days. Well, we're just supposed to okay. Just another day, another news headline. While at the same time going to mandate this new technology. These times are unprecedented, and like I say, I've been very, very cautious since SARS-CoV-2 started in coming out, and in the way that I speak about science. Less cautious in other domains, but it's the way that I choose to present. I've got to do something that's fun for me, and if I have to make it a little bit comedic for me, then you have to take that with the information. But I'm digressing. The point being, every move that these corporations and organizations and government bodies are making should be scrutinized very, very heavily, and not only scrutinized within the current context, but in the context of where they came from. Just this special cancer virus program. Did I get that? Was the name right there, Nick? Or was it the other way around? I always get it mixed up.
It's SVCP, but I always enjoy hearing you squirm about it.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll just trip it out as I as I feel. Cancers and viruses. That's what they were doing. That's messing around with them.
And bears. Oh my, yes.
Well,
yes.
the thing is
so
the way this thing works is they just say something and they steamroll and they just keep going, and no matter what any of us say or do, they're ending up in the same place where they intended to be in the first place, because they don't seem to listen to us. It's the kind of thing where they go to Davis and go,
oh, sorry, I've been corrected, Jimmy. I said, hey, it's Nuremberg.
Yeah, Nuremberg.
Convention.
Yeah.
It's I'm a bit sleepy this afternoon.
Yeah, no
God
worries.
Damn it, all of you picking on me.
But it's the kind
you.
of thing where they go to Davos, and one guy goes, hey, let's get rid of the Nuremberg, and another guy goes, yeah, let's get rid of it. And pretty soon, everybody that's in a position of power in countries across the world just decide to get rid of it, and then we're just standing here. And then, we're in a situation, man. I mean, this is literally the most critical moment, I think, in human history.
It is when they're coming for children. Nothing else matters. Any hobby horse that you had right now is irrelevant.
It is. It totally is. I mean, honestly, there's nothing more important than this discussion right here. And it's hard because, there's 30 days in a month, or 31 sometimes, and we got to be up here every single night, and we can't. It's hard, that we try to focus all of our talking about this when you're here. So this way, we actually have people here that have done research, and people here that are doctors who can answer questions in a relatively simple way for us, for the people and the listeners to be able to understand. We're not going to college to be doctors. We just want to know what to do with our kids, man. Or we want to know what's going on with this AIDS virus. We want to know why they're doing experiments on monkeys and bats and all these other things to find out how to affect a virus that may someday affect the human race. It makes no sense. I mean, they spend a lot of time and energy looking for reasons in the future that we might get attacked. If they spent that same time and energy and took the same technology, they probably would have already cured most everything that we're worried about. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous what goes on. So go ahead and I'm as far as your timeline goes, Nick, I think you were just in the 60s there, or just coming in there somewhere. And the SV90, right? It was the SV90. It had gotten out. And
SV40.
SV40 then. Go ahead.
Yeah. So SV40 brought a whole bunch of forces together. There were conversations across the pond. There was a center of discussion in European medicine in the UK, at the Royal Society, and at places like the NIH, and they met in the U.S. They met at a facility called Cold Spring Harbor, New York. And ironically, considering our discussion on eugenics and euphenics, Cold Spring Harbor is the exact pinpoint birthplace of eugenics in the United States. And we don't want to keep going down side streets, but that's a very, very important story to look at. And it kind of underscores a lot of how people are diminished and, as they say in the literature, categorized as subnormal.
Mm-hmm.
And at certain points in history, because you have glasses and smoke something, you would be categorized as subnormal. And if that kind of thinking is allowed to persist and turn into policy, that can mean you're only allowed to be 50 years old, and then you're cut off. You got Logan's Run, or you pick the dystopian future narrative. We've got lots of them to choose from in the literature. But anyhow, so coming back to the monkey germs, it brings folks together, and they have a big meeting at Cold Spring Harbor. So think of this as kind of an underground spot for scientific discussion. And there were folks there from the Defense Department, and there were folks there from the senior health authorities, in the United States at the time, and private pharmacology. And at the center of that was a woman named Dr. Bernice Eddy. And she was really the ringleader of blowing the whistle. She had done the initial work with a Dr. Mary Stewart, and they had reproduced, the oncogenic effects of this pathogen they'd found in the vaccine. And they were presenting all of their data. Sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Mary's monkey? Is that the same Dr.
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Okay, so I just would reference that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Ed Haslam's work is important. It's a kind of think of these as different slices of the pie, and he found an important slice of the pie.
Okay.
With what he witnessed as a kid and what he wrote about. So good referral there. But the two of them, really were at the center of doing the right thing, doing what they were hired to do, and that's to protect public health and to raise an alarm. And this wasn't about something that they'd found in a puddle on the floor. This was about something they had pulled out of what was supposed to be a sterile product. And they found that it could create cancer in animals. So they presented everything, and they were essentially just ambushed. So the old white men, the story,
right,
took over the narrative. And a scientist by the name of Maurice Hilleman, who had just recently joined Merck, and that ties back to the Nazis because a lot of the biological scientists ended up in New Jersey at Merck headquarters. But Maurice was an American, and he basically took over the narrative and published a paper and said that, it can cause, it's got some risk for causing cancer, but we don't think there's any problem because of how we sterilize things and how we control, all of our attenuation and sterilization processes for biological products. We don't think this is an issue.
Right.
And in the meantime, they had administered this already to millions and millions. Dr. Hilary Kaprowski estimated that tens of millions of doses before any of the critical work or changing the formula or changing the protocols happened. They went out around the world and certainly all over the U.S. So when you think of cancer in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, really a lot of it, unfortunately, in my opinion, based on what I've seen in the literature and the consistent isolation. Well, you won't use the isolation word. That's contentious, but consistent association and presence of SV40 in a number of problems with human cancer. Not just one type of tumor, different parts of the body and different manifestations. And it seems to also have a different synergistic effect when there's a secondary or other tertiary germs, funguses, molds that are present that interact with it and may cause a certain, like a blood disorder versus a brain tumor disorder, etc.
Plus, it's like a time bomb in the sense that just like right now, it's the same exact thing because it was a time bomb. In other words, you went down there, you got it. Everybody, you went back and played outside, Some people fell away, but, nobody really noticed it. The chickens didn't come home to roost until years and years later when you couldn't even point at it then. You're just like, oh, it's too bad. Did you hear about Steve? Yeah, he got the C word or whatever. It's to the point where there's a TV show called The C Word. That's how much cancer there is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Can you imagine the commission on something like that? Like, what if you said to somebody, hey, listen, what if I could say to you, 30 years from now, you are going to see this amount of money in your hospital? What if I could tell you that? How much commission would I get? That's a lot of money. You think people don't do stuff for free? This is like, I want people to really get a grasp on this on a basic level, man. This has got you coming and going, Jack. And in the meantime, I'm going to tax the shit out of you If you're single, it gets you 30%. Well, hey, listen, when they released the slaves in the Industrial Revolution, they said, hey, you can go work in the cities, man. Just send me back 50% of everything you make. Nothing's changed. It's all the same. And we're here sticking our arms out for people saying that they're going to do us some good. And it's really, honestly, it doesn't look like our best interests are at heart anywhere. It seems like when profit is the motive, then making money is the game. And whoever makes the most money, well, you must be the best, man. You know, whatever it took you to get that money, doesn't matter, man. You got the most money, you must be the best. You know? I don't think so. I think this is all wrong. If you were to ask me, I would say medicine for money is a crime against humanity. No one should be making a profit off someone getting sick. If no one made a profit off it, it'd probably be advantageous for everybody to figure out how to get rid of stuff quicker. But, you know...
Do you know how much an average course of chemotherapy is billed out at?
Well, it costs $1 million to keep me alive. I had stage 4 lymphoma. But go ahead, tell me, how much is it?
I'm glad you made it through. A common course is around 100 to 120,000.
It's out of control. It's out of control.
That's one session. That's one billable encounter. Yeah. So,
but those drugs don't cost that amount to make. That's an absurd markup there. I mean,
well,
Fluorouracil, which we would use, we would buy that for a few bucks.
You know what? Do you know what bothers me? I'm going to tell you guys both what bothers me a lot, and that is that I see the same faces, okay, over and over again. 36 years ago, I saw a protest. Gay community wasn't stoked on Fauci. You know, gay and lesbians people were not happy with Fauci at all. Matter of fact, the front of this protest that I saw was thousands of people. In the very front of the thing, a giant sign. And you know what it said? Fuck Fauci. 36 years ago. And here he is. I found another thing, too. Earlier, Doc, I sent that to you. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it. But it's actually Dr. Fauci giving a presentation back when he was young, and I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but it was basically about AIDS and some of the things that they were doing at the time. But I found it interesting just that I've seen him on TV over the last few years, and before that I'd never seen him. But I just want to point out, this dude has been talking in front of people for a really, really long time, man. This guy has been making these kinds of talks in front of people for a very, very long time. And he is beyond even seeing people as human beings anymore.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, this brings us again to conscious of Nick's time, but we're skirting all the time into who. How did we get to a point where everyone knows about the experiments done in Nazi Germany or the what the Japanese did? But when you start digging into what those programs were doing, where it wasn't just undesirables like the drug addicts, like the homosexuals, it was children too. They were testing these drugs and interventions, and like I say, on children who could be disappeared into the system. And actually, Jimmy, that's something I'd like to present next week. I've got another colleague.
Yeah, because we were talking about how when you don't have a mom and you don't have a dad, no one knows what happened to you. And look, man, I mean, it's as disgusting as you want to be. You want to go on YouTube? Go on YouTube and go look at some experiments that they did on people. I mean, it's just right there. They filmed the whole thing. It's right there in black and white. You know. So the thing is look, but you know, they have willing subjects, and then what if they need to get more data? That's not enough. You know, hey, those 30 orphans over there from from Boys Town or whatever. They're not gonna be enough. We need some more people. This type of thing. So, where does that?
Happening in the United States. This is not China. At least we could sort of sit there and say, oh well, we expect that from those types of regimes. But this has been a common theme all through the history of these programs, and the same is happening now. They are testing COVID vaccinations on children, orphans. The United States is the number 4 in the world with respect to COVID orphans that are being shuttled into the system. In light of what we've found out in the last few years, what happens to these children and the trafficking, people should be up in arms, because now they're coming for your children. You were so silent that you basically became complicit in this terrible abuse and this system, such that they feel emboldened to make these types of changes or mandates to laws where they will come and they've discussed putting these experimental vaccines into 5 to 11-year-olds and younger. So unbelievable. Sorry, Nick. Just
not at all. This is it's a broad topic, and it needs to we need to talk about how all of this strange history we're bringing up ties into the here and now. So so let's return back to the monkey meeting. So we're having the big monkey meeting, and as a result, think of that as a match lighting a long fuse. There was an increasing amount of heat and light and sparks around these germs coming out of animals, and specifically different types that would be a long latent infection. They have a name. That's the lentivirus family. And the lentiviruses came from different animals, and there were several that came from the primate kingdom as well. And early on in this program, and the earliest document that I've seen is 1962, the co-genome patent holder for HIV, who had a years-long fight with Luc Montagnier and the Pasteur Institute over who really, whose cells were those actually that got patented early on. Dr. Robert Gallo is listed in the literature in a project called Investigations of Viral Carcinogenesis in Primates. And in short, it's a program where they're looking for cancer-causing viruses from the primate kingdom, and also they're in charge of a new network of primate centers around the U.S. There was one at the University of Washington. There was one at LEMSIP. They're all dotted around generally near the major universities, so that there would be a ready supply of animals for virology, vaccinology, and this growing science called medical primatology, which is that's a big mouthful, but most people have never heard of it. They don't really know what it means. But that's really sort of the underside of the log. That's where the slugs and the salamanders are. It's a really dark chapter of things that happen to the animals, and more importantly, this growing sense of sociopathy, psychopathy in we'll say the administrations and in the leadership of the organizations involved about what they were doing and what they were heading toward. And they were pulling germs out of animals and then messing them up in different ways. It's a process called attenuation, and there's lots of different techniques for it. Dr. Mary's monkey talks about using a particle accelerator to irradiate SV40. That's one of the options that you've got. And by the way, therein is how one example of how the Department of Energy comes into this story. Yeah. What in the world would the Department of Energy's money or activity have anything to do with bio warfare or bio research? And It's because they just cross over, and apparently the DOE is known as a slush fund for a lot of operations that most of the public isn't aware of and wouldn't approve of. So that's how they just shuffle it away. Anyhow, We move forward, and over the course of the 1960s, they really began refining and narrowing down a huge list of these germs down to what they called viral candidates. And really, part of the objective, it was dual purpose. Part of their goal was to find germs that could be applied in food, aerosolized, injection. If anybody has searched the history of the CIA, they know about the injection gun, the injector gun story. And that was in the congressional record, but
right.
They were really looking for this lentivirus family for this surreptitious weapon. And at the same time, pressure was rising because of Vietnam. The CIA and other agencies were already doing illegal, besides defoliation, they were doing other things in Cambodia and Vietnam. And it was all coming to a head. So by 1969, they said, we need to get the pressure off. We need to get this word CBW for chemical biological warfare. We need to get that acronym out of the press. We don't want it coming out of, the evening news. We don't want to see it in our documents or our memoranda.
Right.
So they had a spin session, and Henry Kissinger and Nixon had several memoranda that are in the National Archive discussing how they just basically took their black Sharpie and changed the course of the hurricane, right? And unfortunately, nothing changed. And that's evidenced by these projects that were multi-year. They didn't change the scientific vector of a program. Sometimes things were very short, maybe a 2-year project, but many of them lasted, 5, 10, 15 years. And the end-to-end life cycle of this program before it integrated into the NIH, into its regular operations, was 17 years total. So let's just stop there and check for questions and comments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just at this point, it looks to me like everyone's aware of everything, and they're trying to move to cover themselves, but they haven't changed anything. Maybe they change the name of a program, or they compartmentalize a specific aspect of something that they're doing, and they hide it under the framework of something else. And because a lot of times I think what goes on as far as what's being worked on at all these different universities and laboratories, maybe going on simultaneous with different grants, but they're unaware of each other. So then they can get a myriad of results based on different ways of trying to get that result, so they can figure out.
Yeah, so siloing these research programs is common.
Yeah.
The critical take-home point here is this concept of dual-use research, and you've seen it being, what did you call it, Nick? Spin session, right?
They definitely they were spinning the message.
Images of them on bikes.
Nixon and Kissinger had a spin class. Yeah. Okay, that's a meme. That's a meme. Whoever's out there listening, we need that meme.
You'll get one. Don't worry. There's what you're seeing right now is a push by the orthodox and even those that are supposed to be questioning it, and this is relevant to Alina Chan and Matt Ridley's book Virus, and Matt Ridley is on The Blaze with Glenn Beck, and their pitch, if you like, is that, well, if SARS-CoV is a laboratory construct, right? It's an accident, and it's in no way a biowarfare agent, and you just don't go there, don't think about that. Just it's not important to you, peon, to be knowing the real details and ins and outs. Just know that it's not a biowarfare agent. It could be a biowarfare agent because it's not lethal enough. Well, this is an absolutely absurd position to be taking in light of these evidence. Again, the history and the nature of these programs. By definition, because it's dual use research, it de facto becomes a biowarfare agent upon release.
Well, I
And,
mean, if you take the storyline from Event 201 and throw it out there in heavy rotation and change out the name and get rid of the flu, because I mean there was no flu. There wasn't. They got what I'm saying is all they did was just change the set and change the script, and they got everybody taking their yearly vaccination that they were looking for with the flu vaccine. So the pharmaceutical company has achieved their result, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, whether wherever you sit. Look at, I mean, I'm sitting here where I live, and everybody has to wear masks and stuff inside now, and this type of thing. So I mean, the ramifications and the social engineering that happened over the last 2 years is apparent, and you can see the physical representation of the demographic by the people that complied with the mask wearing and the social distancing and all this.
The how we responded in the initial weeks to months, again, it's a highly divisive topic in the United States.
It is.
For sure.
It is. And, and everybody, listen, look, I've worked around chemicals and this and that my whole life and stuff. You take precautions for yourself. You feel the necessity to, and nobody's saying anything about that. What I do see, though, is I would say that the majority of the people who were adamant about the mask wearing are the same demographic that stuck out their arm right away for that, because they watch the mainstream. I just telling you, I know my mom and her friends, they're all senior citizens, and they were scared out of their minds, man. Because all they do all day, they're retired. They just sit there and stare at CNN or whatever it is, and they're just running these stories and just scaring people into, and I mean, when my mom took me down to get my polio vaccine, all right, they showed a bunch of people that had polio. There was people, with these steel things on their legs and canes in both hands, and they had polio. You don't want your kid to get polio, do you? No?
Iron lung.
There you go. You see what I mean? And then we all go down there. We march down there because that's how they get us to do it, is with the storyline or the social engineering. Look, I'm going to tell you right now. If people were dropping dead, puking blood out of their and shooting blood was shooting out of their eyeballs, and they were running down the street like zombies, she wouldn't have to ask anybody to go down and get that vaccine or wear a mask. They'd be doing it. But it's because a lot of what we see here has not panned out, and a lot of it's been I'll give you guys a quick example because I don't want to waste Nick's time. It's valuable. But listen, I want to give you an example. Early on in what happened, they were going around saying there was nobody in the hospitals. And then there was people that were getting in and making these videos. And what happened was they got in and they saw a bunch of dummies in there. And they saw some nurses with some dummies, and they went, and then all across the alternative media, they're like, look, it's dummies, man. It's not even real people. And it never even crossed anyone's mind that there isn't thousands and thousands of people that know how to use respirator machines. And they were having to train these people on the spot in the hospital right then to learn how to use these machines, because all of a sudden everybody had to have a respirator. Remember that? But I'm just saying, it's how things get out of control because of stuff like
go ahead. This is at this point where the arguments of a year ago again no longer apply, as they've put their pedal to the metal with how they're pushing things through, and in this instance, it's imperative that you learn the science. You can't ignore the extant science that's coming out about the virus itself, about the technologies, and of course, how did we get here? And that didn't start 18 months ago.
No.
This is something far, far older, something far more encompassing. And, we've reached 19, what did you say, Nick? 69?
Before we go back.
Oh, we're going back.
Before we go back,
please.
Yeah, before we go back, I just want to say we're getting ready to come up here on the top of the hour. We're getting ready to come up on the break here. So before you get going, Nick, let me just say I'm super stoked to have you here. And immediately, somebody in the chat room over here, into the Microcosm Jimmy Jean Strike Zone, Backyard Chicken Man, he said he was mentioning the swine flu, and I thought it was funny because you just had mentioned how they were going headlong into injecting and working with animals. So since we're in 1969, I'm sure maybe the swine flu may be coming up a little bit here after the break, eh?
Absolutely, 1976.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, it's into the microcosm. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank you, Dr. McCarran, for being here. And tell everybody it's McCarranDojo.com is where you can find Doc McCarran's work. And he's live. I think you're live every day, aren't you, man?
I try to be, not every day, but
all right, well, so
often.
If we don't see it, then somebody should make a phone call. Because listen, seriously, the kind of conversation we're having tonight openly about what's going on, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you should worry about talking about. Because there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money at stake here. There's a lot of money at stake.
They've blown past caring, right? So they don't care if a little corner of the internet is talking about their programs anymore. They're on the final lap and they're sprinting in.
Well, I would still highly suggest you look both ways before you cross the street, bro. All right,
yeah.
We'll be right back.
'Tis the season, and to celebrate, in the month of December, Ground Zero and Aftermath.fm are offering magnificent deals for listeners. Check it out. For the entire month of December, fans of Ground Zero can get an exclusive membership for only $49 for the year. And that's not all. Premium memberships are only $79 for the year. Need some stocking stuffers? Well, we have something for that too. A premium friends and family plan is just $129 for the year. All memberships include access to all of Ground Zero's archived shows. That's thousands of hours of Ground Zero on demand. You'll have complete access to the document libraries and research groups, and you'll have full participation in a monthly Zoom chat with the man himself, Clyde Lewis. So what are you waiting for? Come on over and take advantage of these great Christmas deals right now. For more information, head on over to aftermath.media right now. Again, that's aftermath.media.
Don't regret growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. Heart disease is taking our youth from us. Young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are dying needlessly. One of the hardest messages I've ever had to deliver is to convince people that something natural like Extendivite should be taken as a preventative measure. I'm sure you heard, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Extendivite is that ounce. Take Extendivite for 1 year and see what your doctor has to say and how much better you feel. Herbs take time to address the problem. It took years of life to have a problem. Give Extendivite 1 year to fix the problem. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or visit us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
This story is a journey into the real underworld of our governing structures, told by a Navy SEAL, CIA contractor, and an initiate of the Pablo Mayumbi, one of the oldest and most precise blood magic systems on the planet, alleging to have come from Africa as far back as before the flood. The light of darkness is everything you want to know about power, evil, magic, murder, ritual, and sacrifice, as practiced by the ruling groups on this planet. Get your copy of The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, available exclusively on Amazon in paperback and Kindle.
My name's Jimmy, and Monday through Friday, 10:30 Pacific, immediately following Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero. It's not your granddaddy's late night.
Nestling into the soil, observing it all. A peregrine floats above the clouds. I don't know if I'll ever espy the root of it all. Still I press my face into the ground. I'm waiting for the hammer to fall.
That's King Buffalo. Loam. Aftermath FM.
I think I'm beginning to see the root of it all.
Sitting here with Dr. Kevin McCarran, McCarranDojo.com, and top-notch researcher. And we're talking about virology tonight with Nick. And thanks for being here, Nick. Thanks for being here, Doc. It's an important conversation. I'm happy to be a part of it. Now, I wanna ask a quick question before we get started, because it's been bothering me since you guys got here. I've been thinking about it all day, and I want to ask you a question. If somebody has non-Rhesus or Rhesus negative or Rh negative blood, would it be affected by viruses that come from monkeys? Could somebody who is Rh negative catch something and get sick from something caused by monkeys, is what I'm asking.
Yes, they can.
Okay. I was curious about that because one of the things that gets brought up around this is that the elite and most of the people that rule the world are Rh negative, that most of what is ever designed from a biological and a weaponized standpoint would be designed specifically not to affect people with Rh negative blood types. So I was curious if that was with the case, and I'm glad you could answer that for me, man. Thanks.
Well, there've been studies on the distribution of Rh negative individuals, and it seems to be relatively evenly distributed around the world and populations. It might just maybe that's a chance to be able to think of a more better definition than fiddling with the definitions of what a vaccine is, or what dual use research is.
Well, I wanted to point out something too important about and how you talk about what's going on, because you give people the kind of information they can actually use at the doctor's office or at the school board meeting or wherever they have to use to talk about this, instead of using crazy stuff that people hear on the internet kind of thing. Billy Ray Valentine was playing an ad on his show earlier today from New York City about getting vaccinated, and it has some kids in there saying stuff like, I heard it turns you magnetic. A couple of these conspiracy theories that are floating around out there, and it's reached the point to where they're actually using it to make people who think that seem ridiculous, while they all go, come on, let's go get vaccinated. All these kids screaming together to go get vaccinated in New York City. Billy played that earlier on the show. I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But
there's a number of them now.
Yeah,
it's not just.
You could be a superhero. You're going to be a superhero too. Nothing better than the thing is, look, man, Disney coined the phrase, they're going to capture your imagination. So they capture your imagination, give you a seductive character, and then divert your attention and have you do the will of your operator. That's pretty much how it works, in a nutshell. But there's Nick, and I know you're there, brother. Um, Please jump in because I don't want to wait. I mean, we only got an hour left, so I don't want to. I want to make sure you can get as much information in as possible and have the doc jump in here on because I think there's so many similarities and we're getting to a point and we're just really now you're really now starting to shine the light on what we're talking about. So thanks for being here also, Nick. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's important. I'm glad that this, and by the way, for anyone that's, I know I'm not presenting a CV, and you're not seeing the evidence that I'm able to present when I do these little study groups, is what I call it. But the material comes from a variety of researchers and whistleblowers, and that's important to call out. Before I go any further, I just want to say that all of this is owed to a variety of lettered scientists, and then a couple of non-lettered but intense, very highly competent researchers who did the work. And there were some deaths in the beginning, sort of the nucleus group. And those are important. One of those was Teddy Strecker. He was found shot in his home, and he'd been talking to his family and friends the night before and had all kinds of things going on with business and his life, and everything was great, and it was listed as a suicide. And the only person of consequence who listened to these two brothers, it was Teddy and Robert Strecker in the early 80s, who really stumbled across this stuff and began telling people about their theory. The only person who responded that was of any note or significance was a state senator. And Senator Huff from Illinois was found with an overdose in his home. And that was, of course, just, written off as he had a pill problem, he overdosed, or he committed suicide or something like that. Those two deaths occurred a month apart, one state apart. One was in Missouri, one was in Illinois.
Wow.
And then the third death was their publicist, and that was Jack Carpenter. And in 1991, Jack was doing radio shows and, was obviously pre-internet. So it was old school journalism and talk shows and, think coast to coast, that kind of thing. And he got invited to get a very important piece of evidence that was apparently a smoking gun memo off the desk of Robert Gallo that had the whole timeline in it from beginning to end. And he was told that he was only going to be allowed to see the material and have it relinquished if he would, meet the contact in person in D.C. or somewhere, in the D.C. area. And he was in Los Angeles, and it was August of 1992. And he packed up his car to take a road trip and thought it would be a big adventure, and he was never heard from again.
Wow.
So, there's been some cost in bringing the information forward, but the people that really made the significant published contributions were Dr. Alan Cantwell, and he wrote about 3 books. He wasn't really a fantastic author, but he certainly does do a good job of providing an anthropologic record of how he was introduced to the material, how he began exploring it. He was a dermatologist and also a cancer researcher in the Los Angeles area. And then Dr. Len Horowitz was a dentist who was pulled into, I don't know if you remember, there was an early AIDS case in Florida, a legal suit about a dentist giving patients AIDS.
Right.
And he was called in as an expert. That's how he came into the material. And he really took the U.S. side of the story, the bioweapons research, a lot of the original physical evidence that became, the major body of data. He really brought that forward. And then the third publisher was Ed Hooper, who we've already talked to. And he really speaks to the early African side of the story, the oral polio vaccine campaign. But as we see in the literature, it doesn't pivot on whether or not that was actually the beginning of AIDS. And based on epidemiology, it doesn't look like it was. It looks like it was an SIV transfer, and it gave more people cancers than it did, any sort of an immunocompromised state. So let's come back to 1969. Nixon, Kissinger just finished their spin class. They have put out a bunch of memos to all of the intelligence and defense heads, and and obviously media contacts that are in part of the network, that they need to stop saying CBW, CBW. And Nixon goes up in November and says, we will no longer pursue offensive biological research. We will only maintain our defensive research. And that was just a semantic game. That's what the spin was just playing that card.
And let me point out, the
Sure.
modern day Nixon is also Donald Trump. And I mean, he was in office, and the whole time he was there, I pointed out the similarities to the Nixon presidency. And matter of fact, Nixon was the very first person to ever call something fake news, and he was calling it around the Watergate thing. So it doesn't surprise me that, I mean, this is like a repeat. Like I'm saying, it's running in parallel. We're on 2.0 right now with this. It seems to me. Go ahead, Nick. I just wanted to point that out about
Sure
Nixon.
thing.
Good. And hey, I also
Sure
want to
thing.
say, did you know that Roger Stone has a picture of Nixon tattooed on his back?
I unfortunately I can't unsee that picture. I saw that in the media, and yeah, it's indelible now. It's burned in there.
And what a
It's branded.
what a coincidence that he happened to be working with Trump. Oh, all right, go ahead.
But why the tramp stamp? Why?
I know.
Why?
You
Of
gotta
all
wonder.
places on the body.
I know, and you got to wonder who he thought was going to be seeing that, and what position he would have been in when they were going to be seeing it. And I don't even want to think about that. But anyway, all right, there we go. We're back. Snap back to reality here.
Well, yeah, please, yeah. Now, let's go back to the highly pleasant topic of biowarfare and
Right.
mass murder.
Exactly.
To get that out of our minds. So here we are. So now I want you to picture yourself. You're sitting on a subcommittee for appropriations, so a funding session. It's 1969, and Dr. Donald MacArthur, who is the Deputy Director of Research and Technology in the Office of the Director of Defense Research and Engineering for the DoD, says this. He makes this offer as to why they need a chunk of money. He says, quote, within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in several important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. The most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. Now, he didn't get his 10 million that year. He got it the next year because they were right in the middle of pressure and focus from the media and social unrest about Vietnam. So they had to play that card, and Nixon went up and did his speech and all of that. But this is what was happening behind closed doors in appropriations meetings. So they made a promise to find something that didn't exist in nature, because it didn't. It was new, it was novel, and that it would basically short circuit your ability to naturally defend yourself. That's the immunological component, and or a therapy, any kind of medication. And that was, this lines up exactly with when HIV was released in the U.S. But let's talk about Africa. It really looks like this was a broad enterprise. This wasn't a single diabolical doctor, waxing his mustache.
Right.
This was a number of agencies and a number of institutions that we all love. We love to name drop: MIT, UCLA, University of Washington, New York University. We love all of the, we think of their sports brand. We think of our, our friends and neighbors and family that went to school there, our favorites. They took blood money. And again, coming back to, what Dr. McCarran said with compartmentalization and the honeycomb effect of splitting up science into these little combs, that began in the 1950s. That occurred as the result of the Rockefeller Initiative. and that's its own. There are scholars and historians who do that justice, and they will tell the story of what happened to American, administration, to accountability, to the DoD, to intelligence, to science, things like that. And this was also as kind of a transition to think of the rotating door of when it really became fantastic in the relationship. This is what we call the public-private partnership. This was the beginning of that in a big way, in a big scale, of outsourcing bioweapons development to academia. So the government could say, we're not doing it, Purdue is. They don't, they wouldn't give them away. It's down at UNC. It's at University of Texas, and in a number of federal facilities, intelligence facilities, but everybody. I mean, the lists of the institutions that were participating in these funds and in these projects is huge. It's massive. It goes on for pages and pages. So we move forward, and it looks like a number of vaccine campaigns that went across Africa really appear to be where they began. I guess the evidence that I'll cite is that they began reporting SLIM disease. They called it SLIM locally. And it would, that would be marked not necessarily by KS. They didn't necessarily have the pronounced amount of Kaposi sarcoma that appeared in the gay community in the U.S. But they did have the pneumonia, the pneumocystis, and pneumocystis carinii was one of the hundreds of germs in these big catalogs of things that they would combine. So by the early 70s, they had begun mastering the combination of immunosuppression and introducing a viral infection into the nervous system. That's one example of some of the projects that I see in the paperwork. And by the mid-70s, they had moved forward, and some of the scientists from these horrifying, child experiments that Kevin mentioned that occurred, say, in hepatitis, like at the Willowbrook School in New York. That's a well-known kind of debacle that came out into the news, and the nation learned about how these children had been treated and just sort of sold down the river as product, as quite darkly in one of the Monty Python quotes, "You're all to be sold for medical experiments." That's one of my favorite Palins.
Right, yeah.
But really, truly, these kids, they weren't stretched out on a rack, but they were given milkshakes containing hepatitis from the feces of their fellow wards down in the next wing, and then studied to see how the hepatitis, how many of them came down with full-blown disease, how many of them seemed to develop an antibody response without chronic outbreak, et cetera, et cetera. They were definitely used as guinea pigs.
Let me ask
but
you,
it all came out.
I don't know.
Say again?
I don't know, but what was the demographic of the test subjects? Were they mostly black kids?
No, it was demographically, it was a full mix because it was a mental health facility.
I'm just curious.
So these
because
kids,
I know
these were wards of the state. There in the photo. So the best data that I would say, because I like to do, I like to base my research on real evidence, is the images that I saw, and there were every kind of kid you can think of. It looked like Schoolhouse Rock drawing.
I'm just curious because of the Tuskegee experiment you know what I mean. I was just curious because, especially in New York, you would think that there'd be a lot of orphans in the lower income neighborhoods. So I figured demographically, not specifically picking those people out, but maybe that might have been the case. But because it ties into I'm going to bring something up here in a bit once we get going here a little further down the road, because I think there's some important foundational things that were going on from a philosophical point of view that make a lot of the things that we're talking about even possible. And I mean, I think there's a critical path that runs through everything in America. There's a certain critical path that is being followed no matter what. Now, let me ask a question, Doc, real quick. When, if a government, or like say for an example in the United States, if the United States government gives money to a program in the university setting, they have somewhat control over what happens. Is that true? As opposed to the private sector. So in other words, if I got a startup company and I'm over here with my team of people and I'm in a private setting, I can do whatever I want. Nobody's watching me. Nobody's looking at me. But over there, it's different. Is that the way it goes?
Yeah, to some degree, and this centers around the use of the academic systems versus the desire of a new startup to maximize any intellectual property that they have. I'm not generally against the peer review process and the targeting of what we consider elite journals, where what we've found is that over the last year, these organizations have been deeply corrupt. It's contemptible what they have been doing, and even with that in mind, it makes if you're head of or you're a principal investigator, you want to put your paper in Nature or Science or any of the other big names, because that adds a lot of clout and cachet to your lab, and they want the public accolades for it as well, which is what many of the scientists that we've caught in this collusion were doing as well. They've gone and said initially, so this comes back to those emails that something looks artificial here, and then they can change their opinion on a dime, and suddenly they're the recipient of millions of dollars from Fauci. And the private company, they're going to be looking for venture capitalists, and they're going to be, if anything, just minimalist with their presentations, such that it all sounds wonderful and safe. Give us the money, and
I remember George Jr. Bush running for president and having him stroke the Christians for money, going, "Well, I'm gonna get in that stem cell research. We're not gonna fund any stem cell research." As like everybody thought he was doing such a good thing. He was doing them a favor. No, what he was doing was he was pushing all the research out into the private sector where nobody's controlling it, man. And meanwhile, so now you have all these companies that work in this particular area now. And then once you have those companies established, then you can subcontract out, right? So the government could then use these private firms or their research in conjunction with other things, not have control over it because it's a private company or corporation.
Yeah, that's what happened with EcoHealth. And what was EcoHealth but nothing more than a sort of shopfront model that's basically standing there without any attire on, and I'm stunned. And like I say, every week that we talk, Jimmy, it just gets worse and worse. And like I say, I pointed to the Nuremberg codes earlier. The fact that Austria and Germany, it's just the irony is lost on them that it would be them that come first with this idea of severe lockdowns and vaccinations for 11 to 12 year age group, and previously as well. But
you know what Frank Zappa said one time?
A lot, but I always enjoy hearing the,
me too.
The quote.
He's great, man. And he said that he said when it becomes too expensive to keep up the facade, that they'll take down the curtains, they'll turn off the lights, and they'll put away the tables and chairs. And that kind of seems like where we're at, man. Because like you keep saying, no one's trying to hide anything anymore. It's straight out, right out in the open. It's like people are stuffing money in their pockets right in front of your face. They're wearing $1,500 ties, and they're stuffing stacks of $100 bills in their pockets, right? Looking right at you. It's like, can you imagine? Listen, if we can all agree, I'm sure we can on this panel. I'm sure we can, that every man pretty much has his price. If you had some product that was going to change the world, you're going to give, like, for example, I had free energy, and I was going to give it to the world, and some dude came up and said, hey, I'll give you $100 billion for your free energy thing, and you could just get your $100 billion right now and walk away, no headaches. You'd probably do it. No, I'm not saying you guys, but I'm saying every man pretty much has his price. And so when you got $2.3 billion profit in a quarter, imagine how much money you got to throw around. Like, you can just call down over to Hollywood. You can call over there to the biggest agency with the top-notch A-list players, who happens to be Rahm Emanuel's brother, Ari Emanuel. And you could say...
Were they twins?
I don't know if they're twins, but they're definitely brothers. And you could say, Ari, I really need about all your A-list celebrities to go out there and tell everybody, because I need them to be out there to, promote. You don't have to hear, you don't have to do anything for real. I mean, you can just hear, well, it's a prop, but I really want you to get your people out there. And this is how it's done, man. It's how it's done. That's how it's being
We're
done.
all being played at the moment.
Yeah.
You have to wrap your head around it. I know. Forget about the haranguing that they'll give you about being a conspiracy theorist. None of this is conspiracy anymore.
No.
It's here. It's happening, and you've got to have a 6-month plan.
Well, the thing is, all it takes is two people talking about something, and that's conspiring. So, I mean, there is conspiracy going on here. There's no question about that. And the thing is we can't use the word conspiracy, because if you do, you get classified as a conspiracy theorist. How about if you just like a conspiracy noticer? I notice coincidences. I notice conspiracies. We're at the break. Nick, we're going to you. You got the floor. We got 30 minutes left after this break. All right, we'll be right back.
They destroyed the world. They destroyed the world. They destroyed the world.
The entire Los Angeles area. Already hospital facilities have begun to crack under the strain, and civil defense authorities state that the situation is much the same across the entire country. Martial law is now nationwide. Major cities in all parts of the country, New York, Los Angeles, report plague victims falling dead in the streets, in their homes, at their work. The first symptom appears to be severe choking, followed by immediate unconsciousness. Death occurs within minutes. Whether a state of war between China and Russia still exists is not important any longer. Our fellow countrymen are dying. The very foundations of civilization are beginning to crumble under the dread assault of that horror long feared, germ warfare.
Conrad Channel, this is a Class 1 emergency. All civilian traffic is barred from streets and highways. Stay in your homes. Stay in your homes. Those found without specific military orders are subject to summary execution. Stay in your homes. Repeat, Conrad Channel, this is a Class 1 emergency. All traffic is barred from streets and highways.
Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The ceremony is about to begin. Let me tell you about heartache and the loss of God. Wandering in hopeless night. Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here we is stone, immaculate.
Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. Live Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific. But what happens when you miss an episode? Aftermath.fm is the official free streaming network of Ground Zero, featuring some of the top voices in paranormal and parapolitical radio and podcasts, such as The Leo Zagami Show, Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean Show, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine, and much, much more. What are you waiting for? Head on over to Aftermath.fm right now and get complete on-demand access to the Ground Zero archives, as well as the works of a dozen other hosts. Sign up right now and get complete access to our study groups, videos and document archives, and connect with other listeners on our private social media network. Aftermath.fm, home of quality counterculture talk radio. Aftermath.fm.
Don't regret growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. Heart disease is taking our youth from us. Young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are dying needlessly. One of the hardest messages I've ever had to deliver is to convince people that something natural like Extendivite should be taken as a preventative measure. I'm sure you heard, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Extendivite is that ounce. Take Extendivite for 1 year and see what your doctor has to say and how much better you feel. Herbs take time to address the problem. It took years of life to have a problem. Give Extendivite 1 year to fix the problem. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or visit us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
On June 1st, 1996, John and Joyce Edmonds purchased a ranch in Rainbow Valley, Arizona. What has ensued for the past 2+ decades beguiles all concepts of our reality. After 23 years, John has finally told his whole story. The story of Stardust Ranch transcends its geography and John and Joyce Edmonds themselves. It becomes a story for the human race at a very important time in our journey as people on this planet. Get your copy of Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, available exclusively on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle.
Look at the man with a smile on his face. Look like he's always feeling good. Sometime you might wanna take his place. Sometimes I think that you would. When the sun is going down.
We're looking into the dark history of the pharmaceutical, industrial, medical for-profit complex with deep researcher Nick and Dr. Kevin Cairns here, the outlaw neurologist. This is Johnny Lang.
Look at the people that learn how to lie so easy. They learn how to lie to get what they need. And after they got what they needed, oh, it turns into a simple case of greed. When they no longer feel it safe.
Man, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's just a matter of greed, man. When you got more than you need, it's a matter of greed. I mean,
And influence and clout, Jim.
jeez. Yeah, I mean, how much is enough? You know, I mean, I don't know. Look, you know, I mean, here's the thing, and I want to get to Nick right away. Here's the thing is that the American people for a really long time put their trust in the government and thought that people had our backs, thought they had our best interests at heart. But like I keep saying, the object of this country is profit, is money, is starting your own business. The idea that you could be free to start your own business and get rich, be a rich American, you know? And so when that's the goal, then anything goes. Look, man, when you're in a street fight, anything goes, right? You're not going to be sitting there worrying about any rules, right? You're trying to win that fight. And that's what it is in this world. It's a street fight. And there are no rules in business, man. The rules are you show profit to those shareholders. You show that profit. Look, bottom line, no matter how you look at any of this stuff, there's two companies that own everything in this world. Two companies.
Yep.
So, that means they're making money everywhere. They're making money. Every single penny that we make goes back to the very same people. The people that pay us the money, they own everything that we buy. They make profit off every single cent. And then they get the rest of it, they get out of us in taxes. So literally, we exist. It's almost like we're existing as guinea pigs in this pen called America, so that we could just be experimented on and have our funds drained out of us through the medical industrial complex. That's what it seems like.
Well, at least you're free-range cattle in this case.
Oh man, it's a dark history in this country. It's not, we point at the things that other people have done, but it's the fact of the matter is that the finger, how what they say about pointing that finger. And I'm just saying too is that when you're okay with experiments being done on people that don't have anybody that cares about them, it's the same thing as not caring because somebody's Muslim that they don't get their rights. They get thrown in a black prison in America. And they get thrown in there just because, and nobody knows they're there. And then, you're okay with that, though, because they're your enemy and you hate them. All these things, that you're okay with because there's some enemy or a rag doll or something that gets put up in front of you makes it okay for us to dehumanize others in the course of our trying to further humanity. Indians, American Indians were put on reservations. They didn't have any. They separated them from their parents too. It's another thing. And then they injected them with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Imagine someone who's, I don't know, have I seen a 1960s banknote? I don't think so. But I've skipped the thought I had, but what were you saying, Jimmy? Just prior to that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, this is a situation where there's a dark history and a dark past leading up to this moment. And Nick was about to get us there. We got about 20 minutes left, but I'm sorry that I can't recall what was going on just a moment ago because I was reading something right when you asked me that. So you caught me off guard. But go ahead, Nick. You got the floor, man.
Okay, here's the tip of the spear.
All right.
So we have we see in the history of the development of hepatitis vaccines a dangerous commingling of using chimpanzees both as test subjects and also as what they called them viral mixers. So you would inject hepatitis B into the monkey, let it get chronically sick, produce a high count of hepatitis virus, and then you would cull the monkey and collect and filter and use that material to produce a human vaccine candidate. So that was occurring. It didn't just occur in one place. I've got a paper that is reflecting on the surveillance window from a trial that began, I believe, with Merck in 1975. And it said by the end of the 2-year surveillance window, of the 1,500 homosexual volunteers in New York City that they got, think of this, 75, more than 50% could not be located. That was their language, could not be located.
Wow.
Now, if you were sick or dead, you wouldn't be located. And people didn't have cell phones and voicemails or pagers or answering machines or anything in 1975. So
Wow.
that's some of the
That's
hard
just-
evidence that brings us to, the point of the story. From my personal, the African side of the story is equally important. And I've come to feel very strongly about that as I got further and further into the work. But, as far as where it hit home for me, I was a young gay kid, and I did not, I was very young. So that's why I'm here and able to tell you this story and not dead. But everybody older than me started getting sick and dying. And it hit, obviously, in the cities where they performed the hepatitis study, it followed immediately. So for they started in November of 1978 in New York City out of the Kimball Blood Center, the New York Blood Center, and Dr. Wolf Smunis was the lead scientist. He built up the study. He had a history of hepatitis papers and research. He'd had a loved one get sick with it, and that was kind of his origin story about why he was involved in that part of science. But he, interesting character. And they began those vaccinations, 3 shots in November. And I have spoken to witnesses who were there in New York, in San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and who said that they saw and remember people getting sick and starting looking really rough in the spring of 1979. That was a New York testimony. And I've had some other testimonies from eyewitnesses who actually were in the study. And one of them, we feel very strongly got placebo. Obviously, he didn't get the live shot. And a lot of their questions come back to sort of moral equivocation, sort of bargaining with yourself about who is the minimum amount of people who might have been involved in this and might have known about this. There isn't any policy or a strategic artifact that says from the White House or from the head of the CIA or the head of the Army exactly what the whole thing was going to be. But we see lots of smaller pieces, sort of bricks in the road along the path that show that there was an intent to create the type of weapon. There was clearly personal behavior in the record with Nixon and Kissinger at this sort of the critical moment in time about their homophobia. And, I don't know how much influence the U.S. had on what occurred in Africa. I don't know if that was all the UN, if that was the WHO. I really, I don't have access to get that kind of specific information. So if people had access to, someone in that part of the world or history or records or things like that, that would be something very interesting to learn about. But what really just, seems very, very strong from the, the early work and the focusing of a lot of the projects on the primate retrovirus family, and then the combination of germs together to create not only a primary but secondary diseases combined with immunosuppression, all laid out, in federal records available through the Library of Congress, and a number of the universities have special collections that contain these items. It appears that, the ground zero for the U.S. was those hepatitis volunteers. There was 1,083 in New York, and about, I think, 580 some in San Francisco, and I believe 700 odd in Los Angeles. And I've spoken to folks from, each location. And so from an eyewitness, from a statistical analysis or very, very hard science perspective, it's a tiny little cohort that I've personally encountered. But from a humanitarian and a personal story and an eyewitness perspective, they were there. And they shared very important details. But the bulk of where this information can be found is in a book called Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola by Horowitz, and In the River by Ed Hooper. If people want to get something off the shelf, those are both available in digital formats. They're big mountains to climb. And Edward is not the scientist. He's got a tremendous grasp of the English language, but he doesn't speak in scientific jargon. Some of Horowitz's work is highly scientific, but Horowitz has an edition with a lot of photocopies of the records that my discussion touches on. So that's where people can go if they want to dig in deeper.
I would say, and I'll put forward here in the last few minutes of the show, that it's been my opinion for a long time this is a race-specific bioweapon, and that because originally the people that were going to be affected by it, they figured no one would care about, and so they'd be able to really see how they could propagate this agent. So when you look overwhelmingly at this statistics around the demographics around HIV and AIDS, for example, the rate of black males living with HIV is 5.6 times that of white males. The rate of black females living with HIV diagnosis is 17.4 times that of white females. So if you look at the statistics as far as the demographics, you can see specifically that there is a overwhelming history of black folks passing away and also, catching whatever this may or may not have been. So that goes back to what we were talking about originally, which is, Margaret Sanger and the Planned Parenthood operation. Now, Margaret Sanger also had brought in some of these ex-Nazis directly into her organization. Not sure if you guys knew that. And I wanted to read this piece. I got this piece here. Just a minute. Let me find this here. Let me get back to it. I was going to read you this piece about, here, hang on a second. Here, check this out. In 1939, we got 9 minutes left. I'll try to be quick. In 1939, Margaret Sanger organized the Negro Project, designed to eliminate members of which she believed to be, quote, an inferior race, unquote. She justified her proposal because, quote, the mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, still breed carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. She went on to reveal that she intended to hire 3 or 4 colored ministers to travel to various black enclaves to propagandize for birth control. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it even occurs to any of their more rebellious members. That's the lady who started Planned Parenthood.
I had read some about the intersection with German scientists, and it's a strange and difficult thing, particularly if you've never seen actual evidence. An ID, a list of the names, something on federal letterhead. There's a lot of artifacts that are out there. But then there are also, like, for example, did you see the Hunting Hitler series?
No.
Oh, wow. A really, really deep dive, a physical assessment of the historical sites. They found physical artifacts. They found a submarine. They find stuff in Norway. They're all over South America. It's a great team. It's on Amazon Prime. Hunting Hitler. It's a three season series.
I see.
And it's hard investigative science, and they bring in some really really amazing. They go on site all over the world. So,
I could have saved him.
I
could have saved him a lot of time and energy, man. Because I never thought Hitler killed himself in that bunker, just like Epstein didn't kill himself. They had a body.
Uncle Aldolfo didn't kill himself.
Neither did what's his nuts down there in Spain. What's his nuts? He just died recently. The software dude, the virus protection guy.
Oh, McAfee.
Yeah, McAfee. McAfee's not dead either. They're all having cocktails on a different island. All right, you guys, we run out of time. Nick, you're welcome back on the show anytime, man. And Doc, you're coming back next Tuesday. We're going to talk a little bit about these orphans and stuff. Maybe you want to drop on back by next week. Nick, you're obviously welcome anytime. You got an open chair here on Into the Microcosm, man. Really appreciate you being here and all your time and energy and your research that you put in on the subject, and that you're able to drop by here and share it with us in the audience tonight. We still got a bunch of people over on the website, man, and we are number 5 on TalkStream Live. So thanks, TalkStream Live. Thanks, Aftermath FM. Thanks, Doc McCarran. McCarran Dojo is where you can find the Doc's work, and Nick on Twitter is where you can find Nick on Twitter. All right, you guys.
That's at Pizza Pickle Spur. I've put it in the chat, but there'll be plenty of Nicks on Twitter. So at Pizza Pickle Spur. There you go. If you want to find Nick.
Sweet. All right, you guys. We got to get out of here. Time's up.
Add some to your day when you buy Beefy McDouble, Crispy McChicken,
Add some to your day when you add a Crispy McChicken to it. I don't think so. Did you see the dude who sued McDonald's that the food was unfit for human consumption because it was washed in all this stuff? He won his suit today. Believe it or not. That's right. He actually won his suit. So now you know McDonald's is literally buy one, get one free now. Oh yeah, no wonder. Yeah. On the dollar menu. Well, unfortunately, man, a lot of single moms got to feed their kids down at McDonald's because they can't afford to eat in America anymore. So, but anyhow, we're out of here. You guys ready to go? Okay.
Yeah, I got to bail but Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you,
coming
Nick.
on.
Yeah,
hey, you guys, thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread the word a little further.
Yeah, me too. Appreciate you being here, man.
All right.
All right.
I've been stuffed in your pocket for the last 100 days. When I don't get my bath, I take it out on the slaves. So grease up your baby for a ball on the hill. I'll polish them rockets now and swallow those pills and say, Space Lord, mother. There's a car in the field now in a column of flame with 2 doors to choose, but only one bears your name. You've been drinking my blood, well, I've been licking your wounds. Well, I shave off the pitch now and the scope of your tune. You'll say,
like a midnight train through rainy Georgia. I wish it was a grain of sand laying in a baby's hand, falling like a diamond chain into the ocean. A willow tree is strong enough to bend, never like the oak who lives in fear of the wind. A grain of sand is all I ever wanted to be. Lay me down and let the water wash right over me, right on over me. Oh, wish it wasn't no guitar sitting in a beat-up car, hitting every two-bit bar from here to Texas. Then I wouldn't be ashamed to look up my old friends. They would be so proud to see me strung up again. A grain of sand is all I ever wanted to be. Lay me down and let the water wash right over me, right on over me. Nobody wants you when you're down and out. Nobody wants to know your name. You're just another face lost in the crowded street. I wish it was a grain of sand laying in a baby's hand, falling like a dime.
All right, there we go. Those guys, those guys are gone. So I didn't have anything to eat. Hang on a second. Let me get rid of this thing. So there we go. I didn't have nothing to eat tonight. Nothing to eat. I didn't have anything to eat tonight. So I'm definitely gonna go sooner rather than later. So thanks for hanging out. Hopefully it was fast moving. A lot was going on. So hopefully I couldn't pay attention to how good of a show or it was or it wasn't. So hopefully it was good for you guys. So hopefully everybody had a good time and informative. Nick was fantastic. So all right, you guys, I'm gonna head on out. All right, so we'll I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm so tired, it's not even funny. Seriously, I'm tired. All right, see you guys later.
They are our masters! Wake up! They're all about you, all around you. Outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. Feeding off us.
When he's around, anything can happen, and usually does.